In this video, we will be looking at transformations. Now, the first type of transformation that you get is a translation. When something is translated, it is actually just shifted. Now, if you think about how you can shift an object, you can shift this block, for example, left, right, or up and down, and then the shape will still be the same. It'll just be in a different place. Then the next type of transformation you get is a reflection. Now, when something is reflected, it's like a mirror image. So it doesn't look the same as the original image anymore. If I have a triangle here and there's a mirror in the middle, it's going to look at the other triangle. So you can see that the shape is kind of different now. Finally, we have rotations. Now, when you rotate something, you turn it. So think of this block here that gets rotated. It's first going to lie on its side and then again on the other side. Right. So rotation also kind of changes the shape slightly. Let's go to the translation. Now I have here a triangle, and in this triangle I have a few points. Let's mark the points here. It's going to be 2 on the x-axis, 2 on the y-axis, and 5, 5, this top point or coordinate, and 7 on the x, 3 on the y. Okay. So I'm going to translate this rectangle, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift it left and down. So let's take this point maybe 2, 2, and you'll see that the new point, that 2, 2, is now -8, -4. So the coordinates went from 2, 2 all the way to -8 and -4. Now remember, the first one is the x and the second is the y coordinate. When you have your x coordinates and they are shifted left, their image is shifted left, you will subtract. And when the unit is shifted to the right, you will add. On the other hand, if you have y coordinates and this guy, you see it became more, then it means it shifted up, so you add. And if it is shifted down, you're going to subtract. So in our case, we see that this 2 here on the x coordinate became less, right? So that means it shifted left. And so now I want to see how many units. And I'm going to take the 2 and subtract the 8. Just note that the 8 is also negative, right? And the negative and a negative become a positive. So that actually means 10 units left. And then on the other side, if I look at the y also became less. So the y shifted down. And in that case, I have to now subtract that 4. Remember, the 4 is also negative. So I have to add both negatives and they become a plus. And this is then 6 units down. And there I have my shift. Right. Now next we have what we call reflections. I'm going to reflect this box that you see here. What I'm going to do is firstly reflect it in the x-axis. So the x-axis is this horizontal line. That's the mirror. And then you'll see the units here, the distance here are the same. Okay. Now let's take a point. Let's take any point. I'm going to take the 6 here on the x and 3 on the y. And this point now, if you look at it, it changed. The 6 is still the same, so the x remains the same, but the y became a negative point. Now if I go and translate the same guy to on the y-axis, you're going to see that once again the distance here in the middle is the same. The point now changed to -6 on the x and positive 3. So look at the x's and the y's. The numbers are the same, but the signs are opposite the whole time. Is there a little pattern for this guy? Yes, there is a pattern. What we're going to look at is, I'm going to say here, reflection. Now we start always with our original point x, y. That's your original point, right? If it is shifted in the, or reflected in the x-axis, the point will now become, the x is still the same, but the opposite sign for y. I say the opposite sign because if it was a negative in the beginning, it would be a positive here. So it's the opposite sign for the y coordinate. Then if it was reflected in the y-axis, the original point will have the same y, but the x will now be the opposite sign. And finally, there's such a thing as reflected in the line y equal x. Let's go look at what that means. Okay, so the line y equals x. This point would start at the same numbers. So minus 6, there you see. Minus 5, 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 2. You see that it goes through all the same dots. Minus 3. All the numbers are the same. Now I just connect this line. And that is the line y equals x. So you would have, for example, 1, 1, 2, 2, minus 4. All the coordinates are exactly the same. Okay. When you reflect something in this line, so let's say we have here an arrow. Let's say I have an arrow like that, and I now want to go and reflect this arrow. Okay, it'll move to that side, and it will kind of look like this, and the distance between there would be the same, and so they will be looking at each other. Now what will happen with their points? With their points, if you have a normal xy, both the numbers now will be the opposite. So instead of xy, it will now be yx. Okay, so the numbers just swap, right? And lastly, we have rotations. Now let's say I'm going to rotate this guy. This is a triangle, and I'm going to rotate it. So not just shift, but actually rotate. And in fact, I am going to rotate this guy to 90 degrees. How do I know it's 90 degrees? This little string that I have there will now just make a 90-degree angle. You see that 90-degree angle there with the friend. Alright, now note that I can rotate something 90 degrees, or it can be 100 degrees, 180 degrees, or it can even be 270 degrees. And I could go clockwise, which means the way that the clock goes, like that, or I could go anti-clockwise. Anti-clockwise would be the other way around. Is there a pattern, like what happens here with the numbers? So x and y, what's going to happen with them if I rotate something 90 degrees? Yes, there's some rules that you can remember for rotations. Let me write them down for you. Let's say you have your original point x, y, and now you're going to rotate 180 degrees. What's going to happen is if you rotate 180 degrees, both the signs will be opposite for the x and the y, but the numbers will stay the same. Then if you have 90 degrees and it goes clockwise, it's going to be that the numbers swap. So x and y swap places, and also the x will now have the opposite sign. If it's anti-clockwise, it will still also swap, y and x swap places, but now the y will have the opposite sign. And finally, if I rotate something 270 degrees, and this will be clockwise direction, the x and the y will also swap places, and the x will now have the opposite sign. Right, that's the end of this video. Please remember to like, share, subscribe, and become part of the Whiteboard SA team.